Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is The Follow-Up. Coming up on tonight's show, it's the most talked about midterm election issue, and most certainly the most controversial, not only here in Michigan, but across the nation. And tonight, two people on opposite sides of this important issue are joining us live. Of course, I'm talking about Proposal 3 on your ballot in November, the Right to Reproductive Freedom Initiative. It's the women's health issue that has captured the nation's attention since June. That's when the U.S. Supreme Court reversed Roe versus Wade, a landmark piece of legislation that has been in place for 50 years, had been in place, which made access to an abortion a federal right in the United States. Now it's up to each state to decide, and for Michigan, it's on the ballot in November. But before we hear from our guests, we'd like to hear from you, our viewers, to help drive the conversation here on The Follow-Up. You can do that in a variety of ways via social media on Facebook and Twitter. You can email us, or you can dial into our follow-up hotline to voice your opinion or suggest future show topics. And if you'd like to watch any of our past shows this season, just log on to deltacollegepublicmedia.org. And now on for tonight's discussion. Let's introduce our guests. We have Christen Polo. She is a spokeswoman for the Citizens to Support Michigan Women and Children. She joins us live remote from the Lansing area. And we also have Nicole Stallworth, Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Advocates of Michigan. And she joins us live via remote from the Detroit area. Ladies, thank you for joining us. Before we dive deep into our conversation, let's give the viewers a look at Proposal 3, which is what Michigan voters will be seeing on their ballot in November. Let's bring that up and take a look at that, shall we? So, a proposal to amend the state constitution to establish new individual rights to reproductive freedom, including right to make all decisions about pregnancy and abortion, allow the state to regulate abortion in some cases, and forbid prosecution of individuals exercising established right. Establish new individual right to reproductive freedom, including a right to make and carry out all decisions about pregnancy, such as prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion, miscarriage, mismanagement, and infertility. Allow the state to regulate abortion after fetal viability, but not prohibit if medically needed to protect a patient's life or physical or mental health. Forbid state discrimination in enforcement of this right. Prohibit prosecution of an individual or a person helping a pregnant individual for exercising rights established by this amendment. And finally, invalidate state laws conflicting with this amendment. So, Nicole, I'm going to come out to you first. I know that when we talked on the phone earlier this week, you've said there's been a lot of confusion and misinformation about this proposal. So, you know, the goal for this show is to bring out the facts, bring out the information to our viewers. So go ahead and take it from there about the amendment and how you see it.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Mike. You know, this proposal is necessary because the United States Supreme Court on June 24th did something that they've never done before, which is they stripped away the rights that we've had under Roe v. Wade to have bodily autonomy, to be able to control our own bodies that we've been able to have for nearly 50 years. So this proposal, Proposal 3, would do all of the things that it says it would do. It would restore the rights that we've had under Roe v. Wade by allowing access to abortion. It also provides reproductive access for reproductive health care, the broad range of health care that we have been able to enjoy. And that includes things like contraception, prenatal care, fair treatment during childbirth, being able to make your own decisions during childbirth. And then it ensures equity and access to reproductive health care because this proposal explicitly prohibits discrimination. The important things to note about Proposal 3 is that this proposal would, in essence, allow for women to make their own decisions in concert and in consultation with their families, whomever else they feel important to that decision, and also their medical doctors. it leaves politicians and other people with very strong opinions, it keeps them out of the decision making process. It would also block the 1931 criminal abortion ban that makes all abortions a felony, even in cases of rape and incest. It also, in turn, keeps women in charge of their own medical decisions without political interference. That's what's at stake here. That's what voters know is what is at stake here. And that's why a yes vote on Proposal 3 is so vital and critical in this moment.
Thank you, Nicole. Christen, kind of your turn. Can you react to some of what Nicole's had to say and kind of share your views on this proposal overall as you see it?
Yeah, thank you so much, too, for having me this evening. Proponents of Proposal 3, Nicole and others, are billing this as simply taking us back to Roe v. Wade. But the reality is so much different. This goes farther than Roe v. Wade ever did. Under Roe v. Wade, we had parental consent laws for abortion, and those would be no more if Proposal 3 is to pass. Under Roe v. Wade, we had health and safety regulations that ensured that women who sought abortions were safe. Those regulations would be no more if Proposal 3 were to pass. The reality is that Proposal 3 is dangerous for women and children. It's confusing. It's too extreme. It simply doesn't fall in line with the values of most voters. And finally, it's permanent. This is a constitutional amendment, which means if passed, we are stuck with the consequences, likely forever.
Christen, I'm going to follow up with you for a moment. So how do you react to those who say that if Proposal 3 doesn't pass, it won't stop women from getting an abortion? They will simply go to another state that has a state where it's legal, or could lead to some seeking an abortion with people not qualified to perform that, putting them in more danger.
Well, whether Proposal 3 passes or fails, abortion is legal in the state of Michigan. And again, it will be legal if Proposal 3 fails. There are two permanent injunctions on the 1931 law that Nicole mentioned, making it unconstitutional. That law is not in effect. Abortion is legal in the state of Michigan. What instead we have here is a choice between the status quo, abortion being legal in Michigan, and an extreme in Proposal 3 that goes as far as to repeal parental consent for abortions and sterilization and a whole list of other things, repeal health and safety regulations on abortion clinics, and allow abortion with no regulations, no restrictions through until the moment of birth. Those are things that voters, no matter their political persuasion or their belief on abortion, are overwhelmingly opposed to.
Nicole, you were listening to that. Would you care to react to some of what Christen had to say about that?
Sure, I'd love to take this opportunity as an educational moment. The injunctions that are currently in effect against the 1931 law were provided in a lawsuit brought by Planned Parenthood. Judge Glacier did issue a permanent injunction on behalf of the state of Michigan. The other injunction is a temporary injunction or a preliminary injunction that was issued in a circuit court in September. Both of those are subject to appeal. Both decisions were brought by elected judges and therefore are not as enduring as a constitutional amendment would be. That means that there's still a question as to whether or not providers and patients would be protected and not criminalized because of this 1931 law. The other thing that I'd like to raise and just point out and underscore is that the 1931 law has never been repealed. Because it has not been repealed, it exists. It remains on the books as a threat. If there are any changes or any appeals that are upheld in the courts against this 1931 law, that law could go back into effect. That is a real threat, especially given the fact that 1/3 of the country has now lost complete access to abortion care and who have seen this as basic health care for nearly 50 years. I want to talk about some of the other misinformation that is being spread that is not rooted in fact or substantiated in any form or fashion. The suggestion that this proposal would violate parental consent. Currently in Michigan, a child or a minor is unable to access any medical treatment, including abortion, without parental consent. Currently in Michigan, if a minor were to need to access an abortion, without their parental consent, and there are cases in which that is necessary, they would have to go into a court and have a court provide what's called a court waiver. That law is currently in effect. Proposal 3 would do nothing to repeal that. There is nothing in Proposal 3 that prevents parents from being involved in their children's medical care and their medical decision. Proposal 3 does not change that. Proposal 3 does not change any of the other laws that, quite frankly, is misinformed, that is being shared on tonight's show. Proposal 3 does not impact any of those other laws.
So, Christen, you just heard Nicole talk about what she sees as some misinformation out there. Do you see some of that as well in terms of what she said and as this campaign has been going on leading up to Election Day?
No, I think the misinformation is trying to bill Proposal 3 as simply taking us back to Roe v. Wade or as a solution to a law that has injunctions in place against it and hasn't gone into effect. Abortion is legal in Michigan. It will be legal whether or not Proposal 3 passes or fails. And the reality is, Nicole said, there is still a question about abortion in Michigan unless we have Proposal 3. And she's right. There is a question about abortion, and these are important conversations that we need to be having. But Proposal 3 is not the solution for our state. It's too far. There is too much packed into the amendment text that voters, regardless how they view abortion, are against. But I want to talk about parental consent for a moment because I've noticed that in your interviews, Nicole, you've been very careful in the way that you've addressed parental consent to say that there is nothing in the amendment text that prevents a child from telling their parents. But that's not what we're saying. Countless legal experts have come forward to say that Proposal 3 repeals the parental consent requirement, not just for abortion, but for sterilization. So we're also talking about gender treatments, puberty blockers, and many other things. This is clear in the text of the amendment because it says that it creates a fundamental individual right. Proponents of Proposal 3 could have written something that applied to just adults. They could have written something to repeal the 1931 law or to simply take us back to Roe v. Wade, but they didn't. They crammed all kinds of stuff into this amendment that's going to have serious consequences for the women and children in our state. And as a woman, I'm incredibly concerned by that.
So, Nicole, there's certainly a lot in this amendment, as Christen stated. It certainly went through a lot of challenges. Ultimately, it went to the Supreme Court, and yet you were successful in getting it on the ballot. At the end of the day, are you comfortable the way it ended up? Or is it sort of an imperfect proposal as we're voting on it?
So Proposal 3 is an amendment that would allow a person the individual right to make and carry out all decisions regarding their reproductive freedom and pregnancy. That is really the place that we are at, and that is why Proposal 3 is needed. It also allows a person the inherent right to access contraception, to be able to make their own decisions about their prenatal care, their postpartum care, to be able to make their decisions about birthing, and some of the other things that many Michiganders, quite frankly, deserve to be able to have the right to be able to make those decisions. As it relates to some of the misinformation, countless legal professionals have also come forward to say that this proposal does not repeal the parental consent requirement. There are laws currently in state and in effect here in the state of Michigan that does not prevent parents from having to consent to their child's or a minor's medical care. This proposal does not change that law. As it relates to some of the other misinformation, I want to make it abundantly clear that without Proposal 3, we could revert back to this 1931 criminal abortion ban. I think opponents of Proposal 3 are saying that they don't believe abortion should be legal, are saying that they don't believe that people should have access to abortion care. And that is something that I am deeply concerned about. Without Proposal 3, no one gets to decide. We're in a position now where a third of the country has lost access to abortion care. Many doctors are having to figure out what to do when they find themselves in a medical emergency situation. We know that every pregnancy is different as it relates to abortion care and any type of treatment that may be needed for a woman who may be experiencing an emergency in their pregnancy. Doctors need to be able to have the flexibility and the ability to provide the treatment, the emergency treatment that's necessary. Proposal 3 will provide that.
So, Christen, I'm going to go down this path a little bit. Their studies have shown that a ban on abortion will increase the maternal mortality rate, especially among black women who are already experiencing unacceptably high rates of death in childbearing. It also creates significant economic hardships, they say. These studies show that last for years, leading to bankruptcies, increased debt, evictions, and a few other things. How do you respond to that?
Well, those are incredibly difficult circumstances, and unfortunately, Proposal 3 does nothing to solve any of those circumstances. Again, abortion is legal in the state of Michigan. I hear Nicole trying to scare voters into voting something that has many policies in it that they do not support by fear of this 1931 law that is not in effect. But voters deserve to know exactly what it is that they are permanently putting into our Constitution. You know, repealing parental consent, we've talked about that, repealing health and safety regulations, allowing abortion as a constitutional right until the moment of birth. Nicole has said that this proposal doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it doesn't do this. What does it do? Why are we putting something forth if it doesn't do anything? The final line of the amendment says that it invalidates all state laws that conflict with it. Nicole, what state laws are you hoping to get rid of? And how do you know? How do voters know that certain laws aren't included in that bunch when you put, proponents of 3 put that language in there intentionally to invalidate laws that conflict with it? How do we have any assurance of what those laws are when the supporters of the amendment haven't come forward with a list?
Nicole, you want to take that on, that sort of direct question?
Answer the question about what Proposal 3 does. Yeah. And this is another form that I think Christen and her organization is really trying to bait and confuse voters around. Proposal 3 does exactly what it says it does. It allows the right to reproductive freedom. This is a right that voters have had for nearly 50 years, and quite frankly, they deserve. Any opposition to that is to suggest that Michiganders don't deserve the right to make their own bodily decisions. So Proposal 3 does that. Proposal 3 allows individuals to make their own decisions about pregnancy and abortion. It also allows the state to regulate abortion. So this will refute anything that would suggest that this would repeal laws or that this would be an anything goes amendment or that this proposal would do things like repeal laws that govern how abortions are able to be performed in the state of Michigan. This allows the state to regulate abortion. The language is clear. It's on the ballot. It forbids prosecution of individuals exercising this established right. This is language that was approved by the Board of State Canvassers. Why was it approved by the Board of State Canvassers? Because it's an accurate depiction of what this proposal is and does. It establishes a right to make and carry out all decisions about pregnancy, such as prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion, miscarriage management, and infertility. It allows to regulate abortion after viability.
Why are we creating a fundamental individual right for children to be sterilized? Why did you choose the word sterilization, and what does that mean in the context of this amendment?
Well, this proposal allows for people to make and carry out all of their reproductive decisions. Now, it may be the case that the other organization has decided to pick out things to make up that this proposal would do this or that. The proposal is clear. It speaks very clearly as to the things that it does, and they are laid out for voters to be able to decide whether or not they feel that they deserve to be able to have these fundamental rights. In addition to that, it forbids state discrimination of enforcement of this right and prohibits the prosecution of individuals helping a pregnant individual for exercising this right. We know that the 1931 law criminalizes individuals for helping a person to obtain an abortion or to procure a miscarriage. That law is still on the books. It has not been repealed. It is problematic. And I think to suggest that it does anything other than what is on this accurate depiction that was approved by the Board of State Canvassers, because it accurately depicts what the proposal is and does. It is an accurate reflection of what the proposal is and does. Nowhere in the proposal does it include anything pertaining to minors being able to access healthcare without their parents' consent. And so this is really important to note that voters deserve to be able to know and understand, free from misinformation, free from anyone taking this information and turning it into something that it is not. The information is clear. It is all of the information as to what this proposal is and does will appear on the ballot, and voters deserve to be able to have this access to this right.
We've got a few minutes. Oh, go ahead, Christen. I'll let you dive in. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You know, you mentioned that this simply goes back to Roe v. Wade, but very clearly in the amendment text, there are some things that go far beyond what Roe ever did. For example, the language says that it changes our definition from informed consent to voluntary consent. Women, when they go under any procedure, they are required to have informed consent, be informed about the procedure they're undergoing. But the language in this proposal changes the standard to voluntary consent. It also goes and ties the state's hands from being able to restrict abortion in any meaningful way by using such broad language about abortion after viability that the state would be prohibited from restricting abortion with any gestational limits at all. That goes farther than Roe v. Wade. It also changes and rewrites our definition of accepted clinical standards of practice, which would likely be established by the abortion industries themselves, which means they would be able to self-regulate. We don't allow any other area of the medical community to self-regulate. I absolutely agree that voters deserve to know, and that's why I have a problem with saying that this simply goes back to Roe v. Wade, that it's simply a solution to the 1931 law. Nothing could be further than the truth. This goes so much farther than Roe ever did. If you wanted to craft something to address the 1931 law, you could have, but instead we have a mess of all kinds of policies that will have serious and dangerous consequences for women all over the state.
Okay, in the couple of minutes we have now, and I really appreciate you, the honesty and the transparency and the passionate way you guys are messaging this to the folks on your side. The outcome of this vote will affect, obviously, Michigan, but is it your sense that the nation is looking at what's happening in Michigan to maybe change some things up the way this is going to go down the road, that this is just not a Michigan issue, this is going to be a national issue? They're looking at it. Christen?
Absolutely. In fact, in recent interviews, proponents of Proposal 3 have said that they hope this is a blueprint that is spread to other states, which is why Michigan has such a responsibility to vote no. These conversations about abortion are important. They're conversations that we need to be having. But regardless of where you fall on the abortion issue, Proposal 3 is too extreme, it's too confusing, and it's too permanent for Michigan.
Nicole, I know you've been talking to folks around the country, Planned Parenthood advocates, in crafting this amendment, and it's on the ballot elsewhere, but it's not one size fits all, right? Each state's certainly handling it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that as a result of the United States Supreme Court reversing Roe v. Wade, 1/3 of the country has lost access to abortion. That means that when a person is experiencing an extreme medical emergency, their doctors need to be able to act. There's about 1/3 of the country that no longer have access to the medical treatment that is needed in order to protect them, to protect their life. Proposal 3 is an amendment that would restore the rights that we've had under Roe v. Wade by allowing reproductive freedom, including the right to make all pregnancy decisions. And that's what really this is about. This is about the ability to make your own decisions about your pregnancy and your reproductive health care, free and apart from the influence of outside organizations and politicians who have opinions about your medical care, versus being able to consult with your medical doctor and to be able to make those decisions yourself. To suggest otherwise is also to suggest that women don't know what's best for themselves. It's also to suggest that women don't have the wherewithal to be able to make their own decisions about their bodily autonomy and their reproductive health care. Proposal 3 allows for that to happen, and we're seeing these kinds of proposals that are coming across in all parts of our country because people deserve to have this right.
Well, I'll leave it at that. Let's put up their websites briefly for viewers that want to learn more, get some additional resources, maybe volunteer. But at the end of the day, folks, you need to get out and vote because that's the only way that we can voice our opinion, and it's an important issue. So please vote. Ladies, thank you for joining us, and I want to thank our viewers tonight for joining us. Please join us again next week for the follow-up. We'll be talking about electric vehicles. Sales of e-vehicles are exploding, but can the nation's power grid really support it? That's next week here on the follow-up at 8 o'clock. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night, everyone.